welcome back to the Aaron Werner podcast on iCode Media. Today we've got our friend John Rumpakis back again to talk about something that's my friends have reached out to me about, I've received, and even recently made an appearance on some of the Facebook groups that optometry are involved in. And John, that's the surprise audits. There was a medical company that sent out letters, and it seemed like they batch mailed them because I got them and others got them all pretty much around the same time, talking about how they did an evaluation of our coding and that our coding was higher than our peers. Which ironically, if we all got the letter saying we're all higher, if this relates to like how we perceive ourselves as drivers, right? Because the average person sees themselves all as an above average driver. So if everybody's above average, I want to find the guys who's below. But we got this letter, and it caused quite a bit of dialogue, certainly some angst, because getting a letter usually means, at least we think that it means a super bad in-person audit's going to come pretty soon. And it certainly spiked our anxiety a little bit. It did mine briefly, because we never want good news. We like to do things properly. But I want to talk with you about what's really behind maybe not just this letter, but what happens when you get a letter, why companies will do surprise audits or just surprise us with an audit. And I sent you a copy of my letter, so I know that you know what I'm referencing. Yep.
Right. Well, so first of all, let me just start off by saying these types of random letters coming out to population groups are nothing new. They've been going on for decades. So it's pretty typical. So I think that we could structure our conversation in a couple of different ways. It's number one, what do you do when you get a letter like this? Number two, should you panic or should you make a cocktail and not worry about it? Or whatever your vice of choice is, I guess. The bottom line is, I guess I'll start off with the end in mind. If you are keeping good documentation and your medical records are in good shape, kind of like you and I have discussed on these podcasts before many, many times, talking about, how your medical record has to start with the beginning, reason for visit, chief complaint, you do medically necessary testing and history, you reach your plan, and then you code your encounter. If everything is done properly, when you get a letter, and if it's threatening or not threatening, you shouldn't really worry about it because you know that your documentation is sound. And, it's inevitable. Probably most of us at some point in our life will get audited in some fashion. It's the how do you survive the audit that's the most important. And I will tell you that auditors in general, at least the ones that I have had first-person contact with, either in a dispute or working with them on a doctor's office or working behind the scenes as I do with insurance carriers, auditors are not vindictive or picking on Aaron Werner or John Rumpakis individually. That's not what they do. They get a report from their internal division that says this person is out of skew, right, one way or the other. Now, and then they have to do their due diligence by investigating. They go in and all they simply will do is say, here's the code you submitted. Does your medical record keeping support what you did? Yes or no? And then there's various, levels of failure, I guess you could say, is that, if you're totally absent on documentation, then you're probably more in trouble than those individuals who maybe missed one or two little things. I will tell you that it's very rare that you get an ophthalmic professional conducting an audit on ophthalmic professionals. You'll typically get somebody who's not doing that. But what's the purpose behind them sending a letter?
Why is that, John?
Well, because they don't employ ophthalmic professionals to go do that in general. Right now, some of the managed vision care plans do, for sure, but most of the health plans themselves are using nurse practitioners and maybe certified coders and things like that to run their audit division that maybe aren't even a medical professional but have gone through the certification program through the AAPC or have some credentials that show that they're certified to be able to review a medical record. They just don't. For example, in some of the roles that I play with various carriers is that They'll do an internal audit. They'll send the findings to me along with the medical records, and they'll go through an additional step check, and then they'll say, hey, what do you think we should do? Should we adjudicate? Should we educate? What you know? And I have found by and large, again, just my first person experience, is that most carriers will follow a program of educating, and then adjudicating. So they generally give, it's kind of almost like the 3-strike rule, right? It's like, hey, we found something. We're going to teach you what the issues are. We're going to, provide the resources or let you know where the resources are so you can correct it. We're going to come back in and monitor again. If we still see that there's improvement, we'll tell you where that is. And then after 2 tries, if they don't do that, then they'll come back in and typically, try to recoup, from a monetary perspective, and maybe sanction you one way or the other. So that's how the process typically goes. In these situations, here's what I think is typically happening. And let me go back to, if you mind, can I go back 5 years in time, 6 years in time?
Please.
So back in the day when amniotic membranes, I think this was 2017, 2018. Amniotic membranes were pretty new to the optometric profession. People started to use them, and then with the uptake in ocular surface disease, things like that, the incidence and prevalence of using an amniotic membrane, the utilization curve just went straight up. There was a major medical carrier that had been covering amniotic membranes without a problem. When utilization got plus 1,800% or so in a given year, they now deemed them to be experimental and investigational. So what they basically did is said, in a polite way that the contract allowed, is we're not covering it anymore. We're putting a pause, a break on everything. And what I think has happened in the parallel to the letter that you got is that they're going out and they're trying to manage a large group by intimidation. They're trying to basically say, hey, look, you're scoring too high on your 99203s and 204s. You should be lower because you're higher than your peer group. And I think the bottom line is that, number one, you're probably not. And like you started off today saying, if everybody's getting these, then what's the relative base, right? Yeah. Everybody's really high. So we all will acknowledge this, right? Being able to do a big change between the previous system employed with E&M coding prior to 2021 and after. The 99204 is something that's newly accessible to optometry since 2021, right? As before, it was very hard for us to complete all the requirements for a 99204. 99214, no problem, because that was the same as 99203, right? Remember, we had the differential between the new and the established patient and all of that. In this system, it's easy for us, significantly easier for us to reach the level of a level 4 examination, both on a new patient and established, because the rules are exactly the same for both. So if you have nomenclature in your medical record that says you're dealing with 2 chronic stable conditions, or you've got 1 chronic condition that has exacerbation or progression, right? And I really tell people, you should have a statement in there. Patient has, ocular surface disease that is progressing, that is not improving on a consistent fashion. That would be a statement you would want to have in your medical record. And then you would want to be able to say that, I've got ocular surface disease combined with glaucoma, whatever your conditions are, make a statement that says you've got your condition that's progressing. And then if you're fulfilling it through prescription drug management, if you're prescribing a medication, remember, prescription drug management doesn't mean you're just notating what they're taking. It means that you are, issuing a new drug, you're renewing a prescription for an existing drug, or you're keeping them, there's a statement that you're maintaining them on the same therapy, right? You have to have an active statement that you've evaluated what they're doing and you're keeping them on it. It's not just saying, oh, I know they're taking XYZ, and having that noted in your drug section of your EHR. That will not fulfill prescription drug management. But if I meet those 2 criteria, I'm locked in at a level 4, right? That's what the rules say. And so if your medical records are saying that, I think you have very little to do, to worry about when you're getting one of these letters. I believe it's probably a ploy of some sort to say, hey, let's send out this broad mailing. Let's see if we can tamp it down a little bit, right? Again, John's opinion, right? That they're tamping down the use, that people will go back and say, oh my God, I better start going back to level 2s or level 3s instead of 3s and 4s like I've been doing. And they'll get a certain amount of compliance for that. I think that it's also worthwhile, if you are very confident in what you are, don't just accept what a letter says. Don't be afraid to push back, right? I mean, you have just as many rights from your provider agreement as the carrier has. If you can demonstrate that that's the level of care that you provided and that was the level of care that the patient required, again, remember, we have to do a medically appropriate history, medically appropriate examination, then if those two things are fulfilled and I'm meeting my requirements on medical decision making, I should have no hesitancy in saying, bring it on, right? I can defend my records all day long because I was the physician taking care of this patient. And I tell docs all the time, don't worry about the diagnosis. That should be secondary, right? Because we know that there's different levels of complexity with individual patients that share the same diagnosis. So, unless the diagnosis allows you to stipulate severity, right? Which ICD-10 clearly does. So, I mean, I think they're much to do about nothing. I think that, they are done with the intent of tamping things down a little bit. They're sent to everybody on a broad scale basis. That's, again, my opinion. Yep. I mean, I think if it was an individual audit, Aaron, you would get an individual record request. They would say, Dr. Werner, we would like to have these dates of service with these patient names, You have 30 days in which to provide the record. Because if you go back to your provider agreement, it's very specific on what they have to, the hoops that they have to jump through with notice of providing medical records. And by the same token, the biggest failure that I see on doctors on audits, they don't pay attention to the timelines. The carriers will say, you need to get this information back within 30 calendar days, right? And the doctors don't do it. Sorry, doc, it's a broken contract. You just gave them everything they needed because you didn't pay attention to the timing.
Yep, you didn't follow the rules. As I'm listening to you, a couple thoughts go through your mind. One, while I hear you when you say it's a much ado about nothing, and I think that's what we should look at it as, but I unfortunately don't think that's how we're taking it, because if you were to adjust, if I were to feel intimidated, or if I were to feel like I was an outlier and started down coding, the difference between a level 4 and a level 3 is about $40, right? And
it's more accurately, it's about 25%.
25%, right? Okay. So what you're saying, so it's a significant decrease in payment, and if I now just start downcoding what should appropriately be a level 4 to a level 3, or a level 3 down to a level 2, I'm leaving tons of money on the table, and the dollar's not worth any like it was before, right? Our dollar has to go farther. Staff costs have gone up. All of our costs have gone up appropriately. So we need to make sure that we're being reimbursed as we should be.
I agree.
So that much ado
100%.
about nothing is scary if we let them intimidate us. And what was interesting in this letter, there was 2 sentences I want to read out. One says, we'll start evaluating E&M coding. It's the second to last paragraph. Starting December 1st, 2024, we'll evaluate the proper use of level 4 and 5 E&M coding so that you submit. We do this using the recognized policy sources. We want to make sure everyone follows the American Medical Association AMA E&M criteria, which just tells me, just know that criteria. Right?
Well,
spend
there's
a little
2 sides
time,
to that.
right?
Right.
Learning the
there's 2
criteria.
sides to that. Right. So here's what everybody has to understand too. So when in 2021, when the rules changed for E&M coding and they allowed the doctor to make on an independent patient-by-patient basis the ability to use time or medical decision-making, right? The number of level 5s coded with time went through the roof, right? And so Medicare came out, the OIG basically came out and said, hey, we are going to be paying attention to how you're recording your time. We're going to make sure that you know the 9 different bullet points on recording time and all of that. So when you've heard me lecture before on coding with time, you know, and you've heard me very clearly state that my opinion is that you should have some sort of template that includes those 9 different areas, and you record however much time you spent in each one of those individual components, and then add up your total time and then apply this AMA guidelines to that, right? Because if you say, I spent 2 minutes preparing for it, I did a minute of asking additional history, I spent 17 minutes doing my medically appropriate exam, I spent 3 minutes writing orders and ordering a prescription, you know, whatever it may be, and I add that up, that's pretty hard to refute. What a lot of people do is they say, oh, the doctor started at this time and they ended at this time, and there's nothing in between. That has led to a lot of time-related audits that have failed because of lack of appropriate documentation. But I concur with your assessment 100%. We know what the guidelines are. The guidelines are very clear, and as I've stated multiple times, I think they are much more transparent and much easier to comply with than the ones prior to 2021. So if somebody says, we are going to be paying closer attention to your level 4s and level 5s, what would that say to me? Well, if I was, if I was running my practice, I'd say, okay, guys, here's what we're going to do. We're going to self-audit on a weekly, every 2-week basis. Let's pull 5 or 6 records. Let's go through our level 4s. If there are any level 5s, let's go through them, and let's make sure we've got all of our components that we line up. And if you're going through and you've got a 90% pass rate or higher, bravo, man, just pat yourself on the back and say you're doing a great job. And if they come to audit you on doing things, now you're bulletproof in a lot of different ways. It shows that you've been doing self-auditing, which they love to see. They can see your documentation, you know the standards, and you're very well versed on the standards in which they are going to be judging you against. So now you can talk in language that they can talk about. I mean, that's what I always fear, is that doctors don't understand what the auditor's saying, and so they tend to wither and capitulate, right? I mean, it's like going in for your first bank loan, and you don't understand banking language, right?
Yep.
And the banker says your APR is this, and your interest rate is 3.5%, but your APR is 4.75, and you're like going, what? And your term is this much, and people don't understand the language, so they get intimidated by it. I think that if you understand the language of coding, you understand the language of the E&M requirements, you can very easily say, if I went to you and I say, Dr. Werner, show me on Mrs. Jones here exactly, you coded it as level 4. Why did you code it as level 4? And you would be able to say, well, this patient had 2 stable chronic conditions, and I was maintaining them I was evaluating their current medications for appropriate use and control. Okay.
Yep.
Done, right? I mean, what else do I have to do? But that's why I'm saying, if your medical record is buttoned up and tight, Aaron, I think that, again, much to do about nothing from the audit side. If you just capitulate and say, oh my God, I better not do this, then yeah, you're losing on a couple different ways. You're not educating yourself to make yourself better and to make sure that you are getting paid for exactly what you're doing, but you're giving up a lot of money that you are due because you are taking on the risk, the liability of caring for these individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. What struck me at the very beginning of this conversation, and I knew this, but I don't think I interpreted it how the light bulb's gone off today, is that eye care professionals are not the ones doing the audit. So what makes sense to me or is intuitive to me may not be intuitive to them, which means that if I look at my chart of making sure that the story is understood by somebody else in the healthcare profession or not that's trained, right, knowing that I have to communicate what's happening to them, at least for me, helps me understand the process and the detail level I need to put in.
Well, let me ask you a question. So I know you've looked at hundreds of files like I've looked at files,
yep.
right? And here's what I normally see under an assessment. E11.9. That's a diagnosis. That's not an assessment, right? The assessment section of your record is a great place to be able to say, patient has X, a progressive condition. Patient has X and Y, currently stable with existing medication. That's your assessment, right? I mean, why don't you put it into the language of the E&M requirements? Therefore, there's no ambiguity whatsoever on a review, right?
Yep.
I mean, when one of the previous conversations you and I had, we had challenged your viewers to print out your EHR, right? And read what your EHR says. Read your chief complaint. Read your everything. It's not as crystal clear as you would think that it actually is, right? Because it combines. You know, they haven't done an upgrade on a lot of the EHRs for a long time. It says patient here for bilateral, stable, increasing at night, you know, all of that sort of thing, instead of a nice, clear, concise statement, right? You know, but I think your assessment is a great place to bring that language together, so they can say, I've got a condition that a single condition patient has X with exacerbation and progression. Great. Maintain, reviewed medications, maintain current medication, or adding new medication, or switching switching to a new medication. I mean, right in there, your assessment can help you nail that. And then, of course, once you've written that down, I am assuming that your medically necessary examination level supported your assessment, right?
Yep.
So they can drill up into the findings.
Oh, 100%. And what's interesting is I think we all do that, right? We're looking at the patient, Mrs. Smith, your glaucoma is stable, right? We're going to keep you on the medicine we've kept you on because it appears to be working well. I want to see you back in 6 months. We're going to follow up with a visual field. I'm going to do our annual gonioscopy to make sure that everything continues to be stable.
Right. So, here's what I always think. Right. I mean, and I think that you bring in that extra element by, again, you and I have spoken about telling the record what I want to do, why I want to do it, and when it needs to be done. So if I'm showing a patient that's got a stable condition, I can now demonstrate that again through an audit by saying to an auditor, if I'm face to face with them, or if I'm having a conversation because I have to defend myself in some way, I can say, Mrs. Smith's glaucoma was stable. I ordered an OCT in 6 months because that's the current recommended interval for an individual with stable optic nerve and retinal, status. If I saw a progressive condition, if I saw changes in the optic nerve, it would be noted in my record. If I saw changes in the IOP, it would be noted. I would also want to order that test and have it done much more immediately because I need to do a current assessment of where the change is with that patient. And so there's a lot of things that can point to that if you have your medical record organized properly.
Yep, that makes perfect sense. So John, one of the things, and I didn't bring you on to talk about your platform, except your platform is fantastic. And when we started this journey and we started working with you, I spent a lot of time making sure that my coding my energy was to make sure that the prices I'm set for my billing and service fees were appropriate, so I could make sure I'm not leaving money on the table. Mm-hmm. What I didn't discover right away, even though you told me, is how easy it is to go in and look at what the definitions are for each of the CPT codes. And now when I'm billing a medical visit, I frequently will log in, put the code in, just read, because it takes me an extra few minutes, but I'm going to gather that information. And it's pretty insightful. It's simple, concise. You've done a good job of pulling directly from the code and citing where it's from, but it has gotten rid of a lot of the ambiguity and the questions in my mind on, can I do this, can I not do that? And quite frankly, I'm either going to not do it, hopefully to save money, or to avoid the audit boogeyman, or I'm going to call 20 people to see what their consensus is.
Yeah. Well, I think the funny thing is, and this is a behavior I see all the time, and I don't know I really, I mean, I understand the practicality of what practitioners are doing, and you'll understand this the minute I say it. So when I talk about OCT and fundus photography, so here's the three combinations that drive me crazy, right? It's either posterior seg, OCT of the optic nerve, or posterior seg of the retina, 92133 optic nerve, 92134 retina, being done on the same day as fundus photography. Now, most docs know that you can't do that, right? There's a rule in place that those cannot be done on the same day unless there's an emergent type of a situation that really requires you to break the rule and do them on the same day. And if you do that, then you use modifier 59 and you put it on the fundus photograph, right? And that will allow them to get paid. But here's what I see happening with most doctors. For that particular situation with either one of those two tests in photography, they'll go, oh, I know I'm not supposed to do them on the same day, so I do them, but I just don't charge them for one. And it's like, okay, you're giving away $45, whatever your allowable is on either one. Why would you not just have them back another day? Well, I don't have time to see them. Doc, I didn't say that's what you needed to do. You need to just have them back, have your staff run the test on another day. It takes 10 minutes, right? Have them in, run the test, you call them with the results, and you get paid your full amount. You know, but I see him giving that away. The other one that drives me absolutely nuts is that they do optic nerve OCT and retinal OCT on the same day. There's no modifier that will allow that pair or that combination of codes to be paid on the same day. So you'll get the higher of the two generally, and the other one will be gone. And yet people can continue to do them even though they know they're not going to get paid for both. And I have a very hard time understanding when I hear an individual tell me, I'd like to make more money, I want to be a better doctor, I want to be, keep out of audit risk, I want to be more profitable. And then the other side of their brain is saying, oh, but it's hard for Mrs. Smith to get back on another day. It's hard for this, it's hard for that. It's easier for me to just do the test and give it away because I have peace of mind that their eyes are okay. And I'm like, you can have both. You can have peace of mind and be profitable all at the same time. But I think sometimes people just get into habits or, whatever the reason is. And, I can't criticize an individual. I can criticize the practice or the behavior, but I can't make individual judgments for the reasons, right, of doing that. But it seems to be self-defeating,
Yes. I like to say that if we learn the rules of the game, that we get to play the game as opposed to the game playing us, right? The games aren't always intuitive until you learn the rules of the game. I tried to watch cricket with a friend of mine and felt very out of place, right? I kept relating it back to sports I know, baseball, soccer, football, and while there were some commonalities, there was just enough to make me say things that were silly and respond in ways that didn't make sense because I don't know the rules of the game.
Yeah. My only exposure to cricket was Bend It Like Beckham, whatever they were playing in the movie. I mean, that was the extent of my cricket knowledge.
Right. But I'm sure if we learned it would make it a whole lot more sense, and it probably looks like a fun game to play. I just don't know the rules.
I mean, let's take a contemporary issue. So we see expansion of scope across the country in optometry, right? But now our expansion of scope is primarily into the surgical realm, particularly laser surgery and or injections and or, skin lesions, those types of things. So that means we have to go in and we have to learn the rules with surgical procedures for ocular. We have to learn dermatological rules, right, for skin lesions, whether we're shaving or whether removing a lesion, how we're doing it with hypochloric acid or not, whatever your method of removal is that you do, it's a whole new set of rules, right? So you're going to take your E&M rules and you're going to take your special ophthalmic procedure rules, and that's chapter 1 and chapter 2. Now I'm going to add ocular surgical rules, that's chapter 3, dermatological rules, that's chapter 4, and you're going to start to build up your rule book, right? Because I think that you can have a very healthy practice, both enriching from a professional fulfillment side of things with providing big, larger scope of care, and you can have a very robust financial service practice as well, if you know the rules of engagement, right? You would never go into anything and not know the rules and just start playing the game. I mean, if you and I went to go play poker, I mean, would you just go in and sit down and start betting, $500 a hand for a game that you didn't know whether two pair or three of a kind or a full house or a straight? What's the order? Who wins what? I mean, you would never know that. How many cards do I get? Do I throw them back? I mean, you would never enter a game like that. And what I find is people will just dive into clinical care. I want to do this, I want to do that, and they don't recognize that they can do it by their state board allowance, but they have to learn the rules of engagement of reimbursement and how to properly describe that. For example, I work a lot with people just getting into derm procedures and classifying the type of lesion, the size of lesion, the depth of the lesion. Those types of things are important before I start taking things off, right? I've got to measure it. I've got to do different things. And so your point's very well taken.
Yep. When somebody's getting involved and looking at wanting to learn more, right? What do you find are the easiest, best, clearest resources to direct them to? I mean, I know that we've got resources across the board within optometry. I'm a proud member of Vision Source. We have our resources internal. We've got we've got Chris, we've got Joe, we've got different billing groups. It's almost like there's too many to choose from. So what do you find are the easiest and most straightforward and honorable, right, true sources that we can then look at?
So I would say, first of all, break it down into 3 subgroups. Subgroup number 1 would be coding. Group number 2 would be coverage, and group number 3 would be reimbursement. So for coding resources, what you really have to do is you have to be very familiar with the CPT. And when I say the CPT, I mean all 3 levels. So the CPT itself, HCPCS level 2, and then category 3 codes. So one of the reasons I developed CodeSafe Plus was to put all of that stuff in one location so people can look them up quickly with the word search, and you can get the definition, the characteristics, the parameters, right? All of that sort of thing. The other thing that goes along with coding is understanding the CCI edits, what codes you can and cannot do on the same day. And again, I'd tell you CodeSafe Plus is probably the most economical resource that you have out there at your fingertips, that you can just type in 2 codes, up to 8 codes, and it'll tell you exactly what you can and cannot do, what modifiers you need, when you need a modifier, all of those types of things. So that would be the coding side. So you would really need the CPT, the HCPCS level 2 book, the category 3 codes as well. Pay attention to the American Medical Association website for updates and things like that. If you're not using a resource like CodeSafe that already is updated automatically for you all the time. With the coverage side of things.
How often would you, I was going to say, so if I'm looking at the AMA site, how often should I be checking in? Is that a weekly thing? Is that a monthly thing? What's an appropriate interval to check in? Because
I'd probably
every
say
day
once
is too
a
much.
quarter. Once a quarter would be adequate. What you would really want to do is you want to, there's a spot on the AMA website where the committee meetings are held, and they talk about the changes in the calendar in which they're going to make the changes. For example, the upcoming OCTA code that will be effective on January 1 of 2025. That was decided in February of 2023 on when the code would be developed, when the code would be coming out, all of that sort of thing. So you can look up the committee meeting minutes. They have a specific web page. You can download them all, but I'd say once a quarter is great for that.
Okay.
One of the other books that's really helpful, in addition to I'm just trying to think of the AMA publications. So one of the things that, as you know, CodeSafe Plus has a complete CPT in it. It has a complete HCPCS 2. It has all of the Category 3. It'll also tell you whether a code is changed or inactive as well. The AMA also has a specific book that they come out with in December of every year that describes the CPT changes for the upcoming year. So in December of 2024, they'll publish the CPT changes for 2025. So you can have a nice, concise book if you want. If you buy all the CPT books, it's going to run you about $450, $500 a year or so. A small investment. I mean, CodeSafe is hardly a bit more than just the cost of the CPT books, when you get all of that plus. Bucket number 2, coverage. So you have to study your Medicare website if you don't want to use a prepaid service like I offer or Chris offers and things like that. You would want to, be on the CMS website all the time, reviewing all of your codes. And I would say, just so you all know, those codes change, or the local coverage determinations are updated on a weekly basis there. So you're going to have to make that a weekly exercise to see if there's any changes. Now, one of the things that's nice about both the CMS website and CodeSafe Plus, we let you know if a policy is a current policy, a retired policy, no longer active, or a draft policy, and then we also give you the date in which that draft policy will be effective. So it's also important to pay attention to that. You would also want to pay attention to all of your medical panel contracts, or if your managed vision care provides medical coverage as well for some conditions, you want to pay attention to those contracts and to those websites where they generally will have if you go to that section and it'll say for medical professionals, you click on it and it'll say, medical policies typically is what the heading is. And then you can go in and you can search by CPT code. Policy for fundus photography is X, policy for OCT is Y, policy for visual fields is this, and it'll tell you indications of medical necessity. It'll tell you limitations of the code. It'll tell you utilization guidelines. All of those things are important components under the coverage bucket. The reimbursement bucket, I would tell you in all honesty, and I'm not just patting ourselves on the back, but there's really not another great resource that does fee analysis and fee setting for an individual practice like CodeSafe Plus does. You can have, I know many offices, the office managers have these elaborate spreadsheets that they've spent years building, and they will go in and they'll gather the reimbursement information from all the individual carriers and from Medicare and everything like that. CodeSafe does that automatically, of course, and then allows you just to push the button to do the analysis on your own. But there's not other great resources. But you really have to keep up on those 3 individual buckets, because all 3 of those things work together, but they are definitely individual, right? They're 3 distinct, separate things.
Yep. And I'll throw in just a fourth. I don't know if it perfectly fits here, but I think it's very much relatable, and that's just being up to date on our clinical care guidelines, because it's very easy to say, right, I'm doing this because the clinical care guidelines that I'm following, so I'm not just making stuff up depending on what I feel like doing today, right? I'm following published guidelines, and then I just use that reflection, as you mentioned earlier, back into my documentation.
Thank you for bringing that up. I couldn't agree more. Sorry, my bad for omitting it, but you're absolutely right. So I would tell you should be very well versed with both the Academy of Ophthalmology preferred practice patterns and the AOA clinical guidelines. Both are great resources, but you should be very familiar with them both. Also, pay attention to the date of the information. I know that AOA has been working feverishly to update their clinical practice guidelines, but it takes a couple of years for them to come up with a policy. Some of the policies are somewhat dated in there. Maybe go back to the mid-2015, 2017 era. Academy of Ophthalmology is pretty up to date on things. They'll have some things that are older, but they'll have additions or addendum to the policy. I think it would be great, I mean, depending on what you do in your practice, right, Aaron, it would be great for you if you said, hey, I've got a big glaucoma practice and I've got a big MACD and a big dry eye practice. Okay, let me pay attention to those three buckets, because that's 85% of the clinical care that I do. And, what should I be doing? And I know that you in Vision Source have done a fabulous job in Chris Wolf developing the clinical protocols that really are referenced on those resources and then brought up to the clinical population to help make it easier to assimilate and to implement into practice. And I think that's great, because if somebody challenges your medically necessary examination, you can say, well, that's how I choose to do it. And they would say, but the Academy of Ophthalmology or the AOA says that, you don't need to do OCT on an advanced glaucoma patient, right? Visual fields is the test of choice. And now you've been doing 3 OCTs a year because the patient was advanced, right? So, I mean, there's all sorts of different, scenarios you could dream up, but I think you're absolutely right. Being very familiar with those is definitely a good fourth bucket. Yep.
And I'll share how I do that, because looking at them became fairly overwhelming when I looked at how much was there for all of them. And so I decided that every month I'm going to read one. Right, really easy to download to my iPad or to my e-reader, and Lord knows I spend way too much time in the car waiting for my kids' soccer practice to end, or something else. And at first they look like they're super big files, but a good chunk of that is preamble. That's important, but it's the same for all of them. And then the references, and so the meat and potatoes of it really isn't hard to digest, and it's been kind of neat. Remembering some of the things that I learned in school, recognizing the differences sometimes from what the reps come in and say we should be doing, or is proper, and opposed to looking at what's been published and evidence-based by our peers. And a lot of it's just really, really good reminders, because in the middle of the day after lunch, when I'm hungry and I haven't had the second Red Bull of the day, right, it's hard to remember on the fly some of those things. So if it's just constantly being reminded of them, I feel like I'm much more engaged and in touch.
I think I lost you.
The clinical knowledge I need. The Myopia Collective. Cooper Vision and the AOA have partnered in a groundbreaking initiative to change the way optometrists in the U.S. treat children with myopia. The purpose of the Myopia Collective is to rally the profession of optometry and its allies to interrupt the status quo and elevate the new standard of care for children with myopia. Every individual is encouraged to become a member of the collective. By joining, you commit to taking action to help slow the progression of myopia in children. You'll receive updates and information about the collective and its work in the fight against myopia, gain access to educational opportunities and resources offered by the collective, and hear from change agents, the ambassador optometrists selected to serve as advocates for community and policy change that facilitates the mission of the collective. Scan the QR code or click on the link in the show notes to join the collective today. In the past, our focus revolved around prescribing MacuHealth or MacuHealth Plus to patients at risk of macular degeneration, while also recommending it to collegiate and professional athletes for enhanced contrast sensitivity in sports performance. However, this year's introduction of the Life Meter has been a game changer. The Life Meter revealed a concerning truth. Many of my patients have alarmingly low skin carotenoid levels, indicating potential deficiencies in essential body tissues like the retina and brain. Supported by over 30 peer-reviewed publications, Life Meter's accuracy, consistency, and effectiveness has been demonstrated across 2,000 subjects with diverse backgrounds. With this newfound insight, I can now have meaningful conversations about carotenoid levels with all of my patients, even those who may seem outwardly healthy. To learn more about this empowering technology, feel free to contact your MacuHealth representative or click on the link in the show notes. Together, let's optimize patient care and elevate their well-being. So yeah, John, I was saying that I like to read that. I've learned to read that kind of the meat and potatoes of those reports, and I find just when I'm seeing patients, it's a lot easier to recall some of the things that I've learned in school, because it's not the test that I'm trying to plan for. It's I saw a kid, now I'm seeing grandma. my staff is
Right.
upset at me about something. I forgot lunch, and so I'm running on another Red Bull. So just having that data fresh in my mind has been
Yeah.
a lot of fun.
The question that I have for you is, so I give advice to a lot of ODs on how to implement processes into their practice. What have you found your secret is to be able to, say, take it from the written word that you're reading to the actual implementation and the delivery to the staff? Because I think that that's really where the difference between, hey, I have great intentions, to I wish I had more impact, because
Yep.
I'm not doing that. What have you found to be your trade secret on that?
No, good question. I've done it the wrong way too many times. So what seems to work for us now is just picking one piece of the bigger activity. So we eat the elephant one bite at a time, and then we outline what good looks like. So I know what success failure looks like, and it has to be a reportable number. It can't be a we try harder or we do more of. Right? There's got to be a very clear tactical KPI. I know the word KPI is overused, but KPI, trackable number that we can measure. And if we need to adjust that as we go, then we adjust it as we go. So I think my top three things are: one, we focus on something small but impactful, and define what good looks like. Two, we've got that reportable number so we can grade ourselves. And then three, I don't let perfection get in the way of doing something. Right? The first challenge is making a decision, and after that it's easy. If we need to make another decision to refine it, we just make another decision.
Great. So now let's take that full circle to where we started our conversation. People are getting letters in the mail, they're panicking, and it's creating a lot of angst and distress, right? So what would be step number one if I received one of those letters? Step number one, eating my elephant one bite at a time. I would go into my EHR and I would see what percentage each level of E&M code is of my total E&M code. So I would take my 99202s, 12s, 03s, 13s, 04s, 14s, 05s, 15s, get a total, and then break down every code as a percentage of the total of E&Ms. That way I can now talk real numbers, right? That's my KPI that's deliverable. So that would be step number one, a definite, here's what I can do so I can quantify, because when they say, they use relative terms, you're coding too frequently as compared to your peers. What is that? What percentage of E&M code should I have, right? I don't even know my own numbers. How can I compare them to a industry norm? So that would be my first bite of the elephant. My second bite of the elephant, I would go through and self-audit, and I'd start with all of my level 3 codes. Maybe I'd start with my level 2s. I don't think I would. I'd go to my level 3s and I'd audit those records. And if I'm in a group practice, the nice thing is let's say you and I were in practice together. I could take 5 of your records every 2 weeks. You can take 5 of my records every 2 weeks, and you grade them and I'll grade. You grade mine, I'll grade yours. Let's get together and talk. And you might say, John, I know what you did, but it wasn't as clear as it could have been. Or I could say, hey, Aaron, this is great, but you're missing this component here. I didn't see it at all, right? Whatever.
Yep.
And that's my second bite of the elephant. My third would be going to my level 4s. And for those of you who are doing a lot of level 5s, which I would say greater than 5% of your total numbers, then I would audit my level 5s and make sure that you're meeting those requirements as well. And I think then I could eat my elephant in 3 bites, because it would tell me that I know what my percentage is of what I'm doing, so I can talk about where the industry is, because I can do homework on where the normative values are for physicians of percentages. I can go to Medicare data, I can go other places and get what each level of care should be. And then I can have the bulletproofness of knowing that I've reviewed my own medical records or have had a colleague review mine, and we've self-audited. And now I can say, great, I know where I'm at. I know that my records either meet that requirement or they don't, and I need to make some improvement. And I think that there's going right along with your process, right? It's got to be exact. You've got to have a finite endpoint to it, and you have to have a process and a desired outcome. So if your desired outcome is to reduce your anxiety while still preserving your profitability, then you could attack that all with some very definite, simple, easy to implement methods.
Yep, absolutely. Data always helps to alleviate, at least for me in the offices I worked with, fears. Right, data is hard to argue with.
Right. I mean, I've always said knowledge is power, right? I mean, the more you know, the more you have the ability to analyze, develop a strategy, and as you said, tactics to be able to take on any situation. And that's, I mean, if you don't know those things about your own practice, but you have somebody else coming in saying, we spend all day long, 24/7, 365, analyzing your practice and your peers, you're going to automatically feel at a disadvantage, right? And that's what this letter said. We just did a data analysis, and we think that you're doing this, and we may start, audits in this time period. They didn't give you anything definite. They didn't say anything other than, hey, be cautious, right?
Yep. Exactly. And that also, I think, leads to the ultimate outcome, because the first outcome is I want to feel more comfortable when I get this letter to say, oh, it's just, it's nothing I need to worry about. But secondly, if they move forward with what they claim that they may adjust payment based upon their anticipated rates, right? It gives me, I don't want to use the word ammunition, but it gives me some confidence in going back to them and saying, no, what I submitted is appropriate, and based upon our contract, you're going to reimburse me because what I'm sending in is appropriate, and you don't have a right to downpay that or to downgrade it.
Yeah. I dealt with one insurer who I was not formally affiliated with them, but they had an OD as head of their optometric services. And this individual and I used to get into very spirited conversations about coverage and things. And I remember one of the conversations was, well, we can do whatever we want. So when we decided to downgrade everything from a level 4 to a level 3, it was nothing more than an economic decision on their part, right? They had nothing to do with the doctor meeting the criteria or not. And I was very disheartened when I said that. I said, if it was up to me, I might start a class action suit, because you are telling me that I have the liability to follow this disease state. If I'm following this disease state and doing the work as medically appropriate, I should be getting paid this code rate, not a lesser code, for accepting the liability for a greater level of service. And the response I got was, yeah, well, that might be fine, but my medical director doesn't care. So things in the insurance industry aren't all sunshine and rainbows. They deal with things and that aren't always straightforward. So I think that my message to an optometric audience would be, don't always panic. An insurance company isn't always right. I remember one time quoting a statistic that I had read, that Medicare's call rate accuracy for information that they provided was only 4%. So that means they're wrong 96% of the time when you call in. So, and don't worry, they're not the only government agency, right? The IRS has some abysmal statistics like that as well. So when you get letters like this, don't let it create fear. Maybe let it create a little bit of a fire to say, hey, maybe we got to put some controls in mind. Like you said, we got to have, here's my elephant, here's my first bite, here's my second bite, here's my third bite. And, let's make ourselves bulletproof, right? I mean, it doesn't mean I'm not going to get audited. It just means that I'm not going to have to give money away like somebody else who hasn't done their due diligence and their homework.
Yep. Nope, that also makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So, awesome, John. Well, I appreciate you always taking time to help us walk through. I think it's important that we continue driving all aspects of optometry and entrepreneurship. And look, the better care we take care of our patients, and that includes the story that we document, the better we can take care of them and our practices, and the cycle continues. So.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I appreciate being part of the journey. I think it's it's awesome, and we forget sometimes as a profession what a huge role that we play in the healthcare community. I mean, there are 50,000 of us plus and are growing, whereas ophthalmology is shrinking. And we have to really, as a profession, and I say this with all being very proud of who we are and what we do. We are taking on that role, and we're doing a good job of it. We can always do better, but it's really heartwarming when I see individuals like yourself take on these hard topics and bring them to the forefront so people can operate with confidence on the best behalf of their patients and still have a very profitable practice, because you can achieve all of that together. So I appreciate being part of the conversation.
Yeah, definitely. All right, till next time.
All right, Aaron, thank you so much. Be well.
Bye-bye.
Bye.